first company is ZeptoMed. I think we have the slides up. EJ, great. Come on up.
Good afternoon. I'm EJ Park from ZeptoMed. In ZeptoMed, we are developing a catheter system to treat uncontrolled hypertension and uncontrolled diabetes who are not responding to medications. I'm sure almost everyone in this room must have family members who are friends who are suffering this lifelong and debilitating hypertension and diabetes. Among them, those who are treated and diagnosed and treated, however, a significant number of patients cannot, their blood pressure and the blood sugar level. Hence, they are suffering a lot of a long-term outcome is very, very worse than those who are controlled. Abnormally high sympathetic activities between the brain and the corresponding end organs, such as kidney, liver, pancreas, are one of the main contributing factors to exacerbating hypertension and diabetes. Therefore, we are developing a catheter system to block sympathetic overactivities between the brain and end organs at the renal artery for hypertension and at the hepatic artery for diabetes. You may consider this procedure as an electrical sympathetic blockade. However, unlike medications, this procedure is one-time, locally delivered, and also the effect should be permanent. Many of these patients end up in cardiovascular, interventional cardiac lab because of their concomitant cardiac issues. Interventional cardiologists can treat them without further referral, and they are our first target population. The patent-pending catheter design, the thinnest and most flexible catheter design by ZeptoMed, enables physicians to locate this catheter anywhere along the arteries faster and safer. And also its unique open and closed mechanism actually ensures a most efficient denervation than any other players in both hypertension and diabetic spaces. I have been developing an interventional and implantable cardiac device quite a long time in both global and then startup companies. During that time, I worked with these quite capable team members for more than 10 years for renal denervation effort. We teamed up again, not just for the hypertension, but also diabetic treatment. Our clinical advisory board members are quite prolific in their clinical investigations, and many of them contributed a lot. A recent FDA approval for Medtronic and Rico Medical's renal denervation system. Yeah, and then in 4 years, we will complete first in human studies and initiate approval studies. About that time, we could be a good acquisition candidate for global players who have yet to invest this area. Okay, we are asking for $350K, yeah. And then we'll surely deliver prototype and its bench testing in a year. Thank you for your attention. Okay, questions?
EJ, great presentation. So as you mentioned in your competitive table slide, there are established players like Medtronic and Recor that already have FDA approval, which makes really clarifying your differentiation all the more important. are you able to kind of quantify the inadequacy of some of those existing renal denervation options? Like what percent of patients are excluded from candidacy because of their, the size of their arteries or other reasons? Like, are you able to kind of quantify that insufficiency?
Yeah, most reason is actually the drug, actually medications, right? So many of them are not, during the clinical study, many of them are not compliant. So that's a very big issue during the clinical studies. And also the anatomy, right? During the actually screening process, the anatomy is sometimes difficult. However, from the eligible patients to the actual study involvement, which is the prognostic value for the market size is about 20%, right?
Thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. So certainly, renal hypertension is one of the recalcitrant causes for hypertension that isn't treatable by medications. I'm not as familiar with recalcitrant diabetes, diabetes 2, and what proportion of those are actually caused by hepatic hypertension. Can you give me a little insight on that? And of those that are that way, if you were to treat it, what is the percent effectiveness of those in the rather behavioral disease like diabetes?
Hypertension and diabetes, those drugs are very potent if you take it correctly, right, and on schedule, and then most of them are treatable. However, that's not the reality. For example, the last 10 years, there's many drugs on the diabetic treatment, right? Still, the control rate is less than 50%, right? So patient adherence to the medication, and also both hypertension and diabetes, also the correct, right, treatment with medication on time. That's difficult. Of course, some of them are the side effect very great, both hypertension and diabetes. It's a maintenance drug, not a treatment. So it's a lifelong, and the adherence is a big issue. Side effect is big issues. Right.
If I might, just a follow-up question on that. So it's arguable whether it's 50% effective in terms of medication treatment for diabetes. A lot of it has to do with behavior and adherence. For those people who are recalcitrant that way, so the recalcitrant diabetics treated with hepatic artery sympathetic block, what proportion then reacts in terms of reduction in?
That's to be answered through the clinical studies, right? We have to take that, but if you learn from the renal denervation for hypertension, around from the patient who treated, I mean, imagine that. They have treatment for lifelong with medication, 1, 2, or even more drugs. However, still their blood pressure is not controlled. But with this treatment, more than 60% patients actually responding, right? So I anticipate a similar response in the hepatic denervation for type 2 diabetes.
Have you had conversation with the reimbursement system? Are they ready to reimburse?
Good question. I guess Medtronic and Recommedic are quite busy for the reimbursement, right? But there's some precedent. In Germany, there's already DRG code is existing. And they are paying about, for one catheter, they're paying about 180, 75 euros, if I remember correctly, right? So we are expecting kind of similar reimbursement.
Yeah, I wouldn't compare Germany reimbursement system with US. Absolutely not. There are treatments that are approved and reimbursed early 2000s, late 90s, and they are still experimental here. So
maybe you're right,
just
but I guess
make sure that you rely on.
And we are in that track. We are following the Medtronic and the Recommeders medical track.
Can you talk a little bit more about your regulatory strategy? I think I saw on your slide that you were going to Europe first.
The first in-human study most likely will be done in Europe because I do have a good network of people, investigators and patient populations. And then with the first in-human study, we will initiate worldwide a PMA approval studies. Most likely in US, we need a PMA approvals for both hypertension and diabetes. However, in 4 years, there will be some players already established in Europe. So we may go for the kind of a 510K pathway in Europe. But most likely in US, it should be PMA. Yeah.
And do you envision this to be a renal and hepatic denervation like combination procedure for comorbid patients, or are they kind of two standalone?
About 50 to 60% of the diabetic patients, they also do hypertension, right? In that case, in single procedure, single catheter, not many companies can do that. Our catheter will be able to do hepatic artery denervation first, and then renal artery denervation next for that kind of a patients. Right? I envision that. Right?
And I assume the product is just the disposable catheter that just plugs into a standard RF generator. It's not anything proprietary about the.
There's an RF generator. Yeah, it's a capital item, but the catheter is one-time use. Right?
And did you say this is a one-time procedure?
Yep.
And that. Okay, and so I guess have you.
If it works.
Yeah, if it works. So then going back to the reimbursement question, then wouldn't that be factored into how you price this? They only need to do it one time?
Well, there's a long way to get there yet, so I couldn't comment a lot because that's about 2 or 3 years later. However, based upon all this technology actually came from the atrial fibrillation ablation, right? In the most likely the pathway reimbursement price range is following the AF ablation catheter category. That's what I'm thinking about.
Could you explain why the size of the catheter, the thinness of it, would improve the efficacy of treatment?
Good question. Actually, the deliverability to get there faster and safer, we're talking about very high pressure and high blood flow environment, very hostile, right? Thrombosis, embolism, we have to avoid all this steps. So to get there, to the right location, faster and safer, most important. To do that, catheter should be flexible and thin and controllable, right? So that's one part. However, once you get there, the efficient denervation is next. Why we get there? To denervate, right? However, if the catheter is too flexible, too thin, the maintaining the good contact between the electrode, denervating electrode and tissue is difficult. So we have two opposite requirements. That the cute design comes in, right? So I can claim that we can get there faster and safer. While we're doing that, we also claim that to create an efficient denervation, our open-close mechanism is good. Some people kind of disappointed, actually, because of the Medtronic's renal denervation system efficacy is not that high. It's acceptable, barely pass FDA approval, right? The main reason I believe, technical point of view, it is about the lack of the denervation efficacy, which is depending upon the catheter, I believe. I'm sure they will improve that too.
Great. Thank you, EJ. Thank you very much, and thank you to our panel for all the great questions.
All right. Thank you so much.